Hello, everyone. Welcome to LitChats. My name is Amber Peterson. I'm LitWorld's Chief Program Officer, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Monica and Deanna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Valentine. I'm LitWorld's Program Operations Manager.
Hi, all. I am Deanna Gondek. I am LitWorld's Program Associate.
For those of you who don't know, LitWorld is a nonprofit that works in collaboration with grassroots organizations around the world to deliver social emotional literacy-based programming.
Right now, we work with 15 amazing partners across 12 countries, from Pakistan to Rwanda, from Honduras to right here in New York. Since 2007, LitWorld has worked to deliver on-the-ground programming with more than 50 community partners in over 30 countries.
LitWorld's most prolific program is the Lit Club, which is a weekly after-school program that's geared at young people between the ages of 10 and 14. In Lit Clubs, young people come together to share and create stories, and in the process, learn more about themselves and the world around them. Since 2007, we have had hundreds of thousands of kids participate in Lit Clubs around the world. And even more kids and community members participate in other LitWorld programs like Lit Camp and Lit Fest and Lit Core.
LitWorld's work really is global, and the scale of it is pretty astronomical. And this team, three of us, have the unique privilege of being very close to it. From a curriculum and pedagogy standpoint, as the liaison with our international partners and the curator of all those stories and content, and as direct program implementation, delivering programming and being able to observe and participate in it up close. Our programs have been transformational for so many people who have participated in them, not just kids, but adults too. Dedicated spaces for storytelling and self-exploration don't always happen organically. Sometimes they have to be purposeful, and that's what our programs aim to be, purposeful spaces for that work. Especially in times of transition or through moments of upheaval or trauma, those spaces become especially meaningful and important.
Yeah, as a global organization, we know better than anyone that moments of transition and upheaval are happening all the time, everywhere. And Lit Clubs have seen kids through environmental disasters, civic unrest, and through all manner of personal trauma and social disruption. The programming has been there as a base to work through it all.
We've always talked a lot about how our Lit Clubs are safe spaces for young people in these particular moments and just in general. But safe space has kind of become a catch-all term that means a lot and also means nothing because we use it so much. And while the idea of a safe space is great, the term also doesn't convey the bravery that is often associated and required to tell and sit with your own story in the first place.
And so that's really what this Lit Chat is about today. We're discussing the idea of safe and brave spaces and all the lessons we've learned as purveyors of LitWorld's work about how to create those environments when they're needed most. And I think we can all agree that they are needed now by all of us everywhere. So maybe let's start with a definition of both terms, a safe space and a brave space. In a 2005 study, Lindsay Hawley and Sue Steiner defined a safe space as educational settings where students feel secure enough to engage in open, honest dialogue without fear of being judged, shamed, or marginalized. These spaces where students feel accepted and included and respected allow them to take social and psychological risks without the fear of negative repercussions, and in theory, enable the powerful, complex, and sometimes difficult conversations we know are essential to exploring your own identity and finding your own voice. This is a beautiful idea. This is what we want to have happen in our Lit Clubs and in all of our programming. But is it possible to create authentic spaces where the prospect of negative repercussions is actually eliminated? In a 2013 study by Brian Arrow and Christy Clemens, they pushed back on the idea of safe space and proposed brave spaces instead, acknowledging that discomfort is an inevitable aspect of growth, especially when it centers on identity and identity politics, and that for marginalized people in particular, exposing and articulating your perspective in any conversation may require an act of bravery. And so brave spaces are ones that embrace the messiness and encourage accountability and mutual respect and preparation for inevitable discomfort of growth. A lot of conversations about safe space and brave space pose brave spaces as the evolution of safe space. But in my opinion, they're distinct. You kind of need both of them. Brave spaces are so important when we're talking about growth and necessary transformation and change. But safe spaces are important too because sometimes you just need to be able to breathe, especially for marginalized folks where bravery is literally required everywhere you go. What do you think? Am I wrong? Are brave spaces and safe spaces the same thing, interchangeable? Are they the evolution of one another? What do they mean?
I think to me, and in thinking about our international programs, the two are definitely distinct, but we're aiming to use the space of programming as both, right? You need that moment to breathe, that moment to connect to your other participants, your other lit club members, your other lit moms, to be able to explore different stories and ideas to create your identity and solidify like who you are. But you need those brave spaces just as much, especially because when we're thinking about our programs, we're thinking about creating folks or empowering folks to become change makers. And so the brave space and the space to have difficult conversations and to take on big challenges is just as valuable there.
Yeah, definitely. I think they are two separate things. I think from a kind of educator perspective and doing some of the lit club work in New York City, I often do think of safe space as a kind of conduit to get to the brave space, like the evolution. Because I think as an educator, you kind of come in and you're getting ready to set up the environment in a way that would enable that kind of bravery. And it feels like what can enable bravery is feeling grounded and kind of safe and secure enough to be able to take those risks. But I think, Amber, what you said is so important that like the promise of safety is not always there. And so a lot of times, and even for some students in the classroom, they're kind of coming from more of that space of like, okay, I need to, even though it's really scary, and even if I'm not totally comfortable right now, I need to kind of step into that bravery. And so, yeah, I would agree. I think they're two separate, but they're connected.
Agree actually completely. I think sometimes it's safety that begets the bravery, and sometimes it's the other way around. It's the bravery that begets safety and creates the same environment for other folks as well. So let's come back to LitWorld's work. How do we create brave spaces for young people? What does it look like? How do we know it's working?
Yeah, I guess I could start off. Running Lit Club program in New York, I think a lot about kind of like I was alluding to before, this idea of how do you create an environment for these brave spaces. And I think it really does start with the mentor. And it starts with kind of mentor coming into the space as their full self. Being comfortable in who they are and bringing that to their group. We know that kids are really perceptive and they can tell what you're doing, and so it's really important to be yourself and ultimately encourages them to do that too, especially the young people that we're working with. Middle school, it's a hard time. You're navigating, you're trying to figure yourself out, and so it feels good to be around somebody else who feels kind of comfortable in themselves. So I think that's kind of the first step, is just coming from a place of authenticity. But also the program incorporates a lot of routines that really helps to create a brave space, to create a space where people feel like they can advocate for themselves. And it's done through things like the community builder activity at the beginning of the session, where everybody plays a kind of silly game. And even though it's fun and gets everybody's energy up, it also creates a sense of belonging and community in that room. And that's really important in order to feel confident enough to kind of advocate for yourself. We also do mindfulness moments at the end of the session where people have a moment to kind of like relax a little bit and check in with themselves. And that's a really important component as well. And we have a praise circle at the end as well, where everybody can kind of shout each other out. And that also contributes to kind of positive atmosphere in the room. But really, a lot of it goes back to the foundations of Lit Club and LitWorld programming in general, which is really the 7 strengths, and seeing belonging, kindness, friendship, confidence, curiosity, courage, and hope as all of those components to kind of creating a community that is both safe and most specifically in this conversation, brave. And you can feel the kind of confidence to do the challenging and the hard thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know when I first joined Lit Club, one of the very first when I first joined LitWorld, one of the very first lit clubs that I saw was at one of our sites in Harlem. And one of the very first activities that I observed was the praise circle. And being able to see such young kids, you know, able to give genuine praise to each other without being prompted, without having any scaffolds, which obviously came before this moment. Um, but there was such a feeling of safety in that space that I think I've not really felt in a lot of other educational spaces. And I think, again, just the ability of kids, because they felt so safe, to be able to be brave, to tell their stories, to do the activities, to participate authentically in them, was really palpable. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can see this in action a lot with our international programs too, right? You were talking about, Deanna, the mentors, the importance of the mentors coming in authentically. And I think we also have kind of the joy of working with caregivers. So kind of the whole household is going through that kind of lit club based, seven strength based transformation. And the ability to be brave and see kind of moms come together and being brave to advocate for their community is huge. Thinking about our partners in India at CFD, a group of lit moms came together and made a coalition to advocate for cleaner and safer neighborhoods for their kids. That is so, so huge. And I'm sure a huge example of bravery for those kids who happen to be lit kids as well. But also not, in smaller ways, like one of our lit kids in Rwanda with our partners Ready for Reading decided that the lit club was such an important space to him and to his fellow lit club members that he was going to start his own lit club in his school. So those kind of acts of bravery, I think we sometimes forget, but can be big and small, and both of them are just as valuable and equally needed for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I love that emphasis on embracing both those big and those small acts of bravery, and we absolutely see both of them through our programming. A few years ago, we had lit kids come from all over the world to here to New York to advocate for themselves and for their communities at the United Nations, and seeing young kids be able to stand up in front of the United Nations and say, this is what my community needs, this is what my community wants, and I'm telling you this because I, as a person in my community, am able to say this, is amazing. It's beautiful. But then also when we hear those stories of lit kids who are able to stand up for their siblings or for another community member who's being bullied because they're able to find their voice and they feel like they are coming from a space of safety and bravery in their lit clubs is equally important. So I love that emphasis on both the big and the small acts of bravery, and embracing them both. We know that brave spaces are essential for all of us right now. Here in the United States, we just went through an election cycle. We have a massive moment of transition that is coming up. Uh, our stories and our perspectives and our voices are so important right now. They're always important, but especially they are right now. Around the world, there's so much happening, there's so much upheaval, and our voices and our stories are our most precious capital here. The most effective way for us to advocate for what we want and what we need. Our stories humanize us, and our ability to see each other's humanity is so important. So, how do we create these brave spaces for everyone? Aside from getting everyone into a lit club, which we absolutely would love to do. So, please donate to LitWorld. Thank you. But aside from getting everyone in a lit club, what can we do? There's a lot that we can do. And let's start with the classroom. So many of the folks who support, who advocate for, who engage with LitWorld are educators, and that makes perfect sense. The classroom is an essential brave space for young people because there's so much transformation that happens here. So, how do we make our classrooms brave spaces?
First, you should fill your classroom with reflective media. You should make space for children to tell their stories. You should create some space for choice, and you got to practice what you preach.
Yeah, I mean, I think making space for children to tell their own stories is obviously a huge part of what we do, but just sometimes that invitation brings out such a huge moment of exploration for kids. In Honduras, they just had a story competition that was all centered around the theme of migration. So it invited all of our lit kids to share their own story, their own experience with the massive amount of migration that's happening in their community, and just giving that kind of open call for thoughts, opinions, artwork of every and all kinds at every age is such a huge way for kids to share their stories, but also to find their voice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the word media was chosen specifically
Yeah.
for this. We talk a lot about books as mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors, and they absolutely are. But books are not the only way that we tell stories. And I think, especially now, when there are so many different ways that we take in information, that we share information with others, that the young people that we work with are empowered to do that on their own. It's important that the media that we are exposing them to are as diverse as the experiences that they have and that people around the world are having as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, finally, these last two, creating space for choice and practicing what you preach, again, comes back to kind of educator in the room, and really just seeing yourself as a part of the classroom community, seeing yourself as just as much a part of the group as the students, and vice versa. I know it's really, it can be really tough when you're trying to create some space for choice, because that ultimately leads to a lot of opinions of students. It's really scary to ask students what's working and what's not working, but it's really important, and they see that, and it makes them able to advocate for themselves and what they want, and that's important for them to take outside the classroom as well. So again, approaching the classroom with an authentic spirit is really, really important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Of course, our classrooms need to be brave spaces, but our homes should be brave spaces as well. We spend majority of our time there, most of us, and as much as they should be spaces that are oases for us, there's also so much transformation and growth that happens at home. So how do we make sure our homes are brave spaces as well?
Yeah, I mean, starting off, no surprise here, create a ritual around storytelling. Secondly, embracing stories that celebrate your family and your culture. Acknowledging the strengths of everyone in the room, and prioritizing play at every age.
Yeah. Really quick shout out for storytelling. We talk a lot about storytelling. World Read Aloud Day is just around the corner, February 5th, 2025. It is the 15th anniversary of World Read Aloud Day. So make sure you celebrate. But yeah, also creating brave spaces at home. Bring that into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the creating rituals around storytelling and the brave spaces and rad, telling every story this year, all go hand in hand, right? Making stories, I think, influence us and who we are. The stories we hear and the stories we know are just as important as the people around us. And so creating a ritual around making sure that storytelling and stories in general are an active part of your home life is huge. I mean, not just for little ones, for adults too, making sure that that time is spent bringing in all different kinds of stories, like Deanna had mentioned, is super important.
Yeah. Prioritizing play is also really an important aspect of this. I think it can be easy to really overlook when you get home, doing all of the things, making dinner, getting ready for bed, et cetera, et cetera, but making sure that you're incorporating play into the home space, and that ultimately enables everybody to kind of not see everything as so high stakes in that space, and rather just kind of be able to show up when needed in that brave way, but it not feeling so high stakes and having a little bit of fun as well.
Yeah, love that. And so much of LitWorld's work is based around this idea of joy, joy everywhere. Finally, we want to make sure that we're cultivating a sense of bravery everywhere that we go. How do we cultivate bravery in our communities for ourselves? First, it starts with embracing vulnerability, and all that comes with it. It comes with celebrating difficult conversations, difficult moments, and looking for and celebrating the positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that embracing vulnerability piece is brave spaces in action, right? It's very scary to make yourself vulnerable in all the small and big ways. But it's really an opportunity to invite everyone else in, right? Like, even if it's, being the first one to hop into a conversation when a question is posed, or being able to share something about yourself, especially if you feel like you're in a position where you can. It makes it so the environment and folks around you know that it's all right to be vulnerable, and it kind of invites everyone to share their perspective as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with that, it's just important to celebrate that as well. So not only trying your best to be vulnerable when it's hard, but also celebrating the vulnerability of others, because that just is a kind of snowball effect. And so if people feel encouraged and that positive reinforcement to be vulnerable, they'll continue to do so and encourage those around them. And ultimately, it's really important to look for these bits of light. And that celebration is really important because times can get really dark.
That actually feels like a beautiful note to end this conversation on, celebrating and praising and looking for the positive. We thank everyone who is tuned in to this conversation, who stuck with us through it. Thank you to Deanna and to Monica. We're going to end with a LitWorld tradition, which is the praise circle. It's an opportunity for us to celebrate the amazing qualities of those that we get to spend time with. So I'll start. Deanna, I want to praise you for being such an amazing person to work with, for being such an amazing advocate for our work, for our communities, for what we do right here in New York City, for being such a brilliant curriculum mind and helping us to create programs that really are things that I think can change the world. So thank you. Shooting stars to you.
Thank you. So Monica, I want to give you some praise. I feel like there is so much amazing work that's happening all over the world. And here at LitWorld, you're a real anchor for us to kind of see that work happening, but you're an anchor to all of those other organizations who kind of rely on you as this kind of conduit of spreading kind of LitWorld's work and message. And I'm very grateful to you for that. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
You as well. Yeah.
So Amber, I'd love to praise you for leading us not only through this conversation, but being, that super important example of vulnerability and also being the first one to jump in. I think it's super important, not just for us as a team, but for all of LitWorld's work. So thank you for being that wonderful and important example. Shooting stars to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And shooting stars to everybody who is joining in on this conversation, who is watching. We thank you for being part of the LitWorld story and for being part of this work. And we hope that you are able to take forward the rest of your day with bravery. Thank you guys all, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.